I love a little festive crafting over the holidays, and today I've got a special treat for you. I've designed a template for a felt sewing machine ornament, and I'm going to walk you through exactly how to make it so you can make one too. I really enjoy making felt ornaments over the holidays. I've done everything from our beloved pets, to the TARDIS from Doctor Who, to my own house, to my best friend's house, and more. I based the sewing machine ornament off of this vintage plastic toy Sew-Rite sewing machine from the 1950s. This was a Hasbro toy that actually worked to make a chain stitch and used a real sewing machine needle. How cute is that? To make your own sewing machine ornament, all you need to do is download my free cutting template, which is linked in the description, and follow along with this tutorial. I've kept the template file free, but if you really enjoy making this ornament and this tutorial, I'd love it if you drop me a tip in my Ko-fi. The link is in the description too. Now once you've printed the template, gather up your supplies. Here's what you'll need. Small amounts of a main color and a lighter contrast color felt. I prefer using wool felt. Embroidery floss in each of these two colors, but they shouldn't be a perfect match for the felt. They should be a little darker or contrasting, since we'll want these to stand out. Embroidery floss to hang the ornament. I like gold, which a lot of vintage ornaments used. Embroidery floss to represent thread for the sewing machine, ideally in a contrasting color to your main felt color. Matching thread for the main color and contrast colors of felt. A small amount of sequins and seed beads to embellish the ornament. Cutting implements if you're cutting your felt and template out by hand. A used sewing machine needle or wire if you'd like. And a small amount of polyfill fiber or yarn bits to stuff the ornament. Optional but helpful are tweezers to help hold some of the tiny pieces and stuff the ornament, wax to condition your thread and help it kink up less, craft glue and fray check to help with some of the tiny parts and for your knots, and marking chalk and pens. And off to cutting out the felt pieces. Now, I don't have a Cricut cutting machine, so I'm doing this all by hand, which is one of the reasons I prefer to use wool felt, since it's way easier to cut with scissors or an X-Acto knife. So I just place my pattern pieces upside down on my felt and outline them before cutting out, just so any marks from my pen don't show up. I could use chalk or disappearing ink, but I didn't bother. Honestly, when I make felt ornaments, it's often in front of the TV in the living room and not for a tutorial in my sewing room, so frankly, when I was filming this, I kind of forgot I could have used something else. But you do whatever you need to get the job done, to cut your ornament template pieces out in felt. Some of the contrast color kind of accessory pieces are really small, but they add a lot of dimension to the final ornament. We've got the tension post up at the top left, the spool of thread, which you'll need 2 of, the base, the throat plate, the wheel, and the little thingy that you insert the needle into that has a name and I don't know what it is. And as you're working on this, you might find, if you did this by hand, that some parts of the front maybe don't necessarily match the shape of the back, which is what happened to me here with the base of the sewing machine, so I just went back and tweaked my cuts a little bit. I mean, this is felt. We're not looking for super precise here if you're not using a Cricut cutting machine, but it does need to match enough so that we can still easily sew it together. So just take a little off here and there if you need to. First up, since it's the only piece that just gets sewed on the top of the front, I'll sew on the throat plate. But I did glue it on with craft glue first since it's so freaking small. Now, I was emulating a toy plastic sewing machine, but if you wanted this more realistic, you could use gray felt here or even just embroider this on with silver embroidery floss. And I'm simply using a tiny little whip stitch here to sew this on, and that's what I use for all the assembly for felt ornaments. Then on to attaching the base to the front of the sewing machine, I decided to go ahead and add a little glue to the part that overlaps with the front just to make it a little bit easier to hold in place as I sewed. And again, just a little whip stitch. I've switched to my main thread color since that's where you'll see the stitches and you want them to match. There's a lot of switching thread color in this project, but it's definitely worth it. After the base, I sewed on the wheel at the right side to the front, just above the base. Again, gluing the lapped part to the back of the front first, just to make things easier on myself. And then I glued and sewed the last 2 parts, the teensy little square that the needle gets inserted into, and the tension post. If you're trying to make it look more like your own actual sewing machine, you could omit that part and cut it off the back template too. Once all the tiny parts are done, we can embroider. Since ornaments are small, I typically only use a few strands of embroidery floss. I chalked a couple of my lines first to help me see them, and then just used a small back stitch to add on the details with the embroidery floss, but you can use whatever stitch you'd like. I actually intended to embroider a couple of different areas, but I refined my idea as I went, and quite frankly, I forgot one area. But the template you can download will have what I used, and you can add more if you'd like. And this is why, by the way, that I mentioned the floss shouldn't match exactly to the felt, since it's adding dimension and detail, so you want to see it. For the wheel, I went down to 2 strands of floss since it's pretty small, and used even smaller little back stitches since it's a tiny little area. But next up is sequins, one of my favorite parts. Okay, I have finished my small amount of embroidery here, and if you are playing along at home, you are welcome to do more or less. And next, I'm going to do sequins. Now, when I make felt ornaments, I sometimes do a lot of sequins, sometimes I do very few sequins, and I don't really have a plan here, but I was thinking I might do something like this, maybe something like that. Oops, come on now. Something like that, and you are welcome to do whatever you would like in terms of sequins. You could use matching sequins. Oh, actually, I do have some matching sequins. I could do that to make this kind of subtle. Or, what do I think? Yeah, so, I'll play with this for a bit and determine how I'd like this to look. And I'll meet you back here in a minute. So this is ultimately the orientation and combination of sequins that I decided to go with. And what I need now is a very small beading needle and some little seed beads and my sequins. And a fun fact, beadwork was actually my very first true craft love when I was a kid. So all you have to do here, I'll start with that middle one just because then I can kind of orient everything around that. And you will just come up with your knotted needle through your sequin, or dump it off to the side first. Come up through your sequin and then grab a tiny seed bead on your needle. And then all you have to do is go right back down through your sequin to secure it. And this is exactly how this is done on vintage ornaments. So I'm just going to continue on and do the rest of these now. And so you just do the same thing for all of the other sequins. Do as many or as few of them as you want. Some vintage felt ornaments use them as accents, and some have tons of them. Actually, I have this vintage felt wall hanging that I got at an estate sale. I'll show it to you, and the cardinals on it are literally encrusted with sequins. It's so cool. So go wild if you want. And once sequins are done, we can move on to putting this ornament together. We're going to start assembling soon, so we will need our ornament hanger pretty soon as well. So I'm just going really basic here and making a loop out of gold embroidery floss. You could get real fancy if you'd like. Make this little candy cane stripe, or, whatever you feel like. You want this knot to be really big so it stays secure. So I'm going to double knot it. Won't show, so it doesn't have to be nice looking. And cut the end off. And we have that ready. Okay, we are ready to start assembling the ornament. We have the front piece and the back piece. We're going to attach the front to the back and use matching thread depending on what is the primary color. So I'll use turquoise for most of it, and then when I have my accent colors, I will use that cream color. The only thing remaining to be attached are the spool and the needle, and then the ornament hanger. The ornament hanger I will just sandwich in between 2 stitches when I close this up. And then when I get to this part of the sewing machine, I will figure out how I'm going to embed this needle. But I also want to actually use some embroidery floss as thread on the spool and thread it across to the tension bar. And then I will probably add a little bit here too. Now, I don't know if exactly this is going to work, so we're going to find out as we go. I'll start sewing it together at the base, and I'm just using a whip stitch with my cream thread since that's the color of the felt on the base, and you'll see that from the front side of the ornament. I'm going to go across the base and then do the wheel at the same time since it'll use the same color thread. So I've attached the back to the front at the base and the wheel, and now I'm going to just do a little bit of stuffing into the wheel because otherwise if I close this all up now, I'm not going to be able to get back into the wheel very well later. And it's not going to take very much stuffing, hardly at all. I don't tend to overly stuff these, but you can do it however you'd like if you're playing along at home. And I do find tweezers here, by the way, really helpful in these little spaces. So I just kind of stuff that into the little space just to give it a little bit of dimension and shape. And I'll add some into the base here too. I can get into that easier later, but it does help as kind of just a starting point to give it a little bit of poof. After that bit of stuffing, I switched to turquoise thread and continued with my whip stitch, sewing up the right side of the ornament and around the post for the spool of thread at the top, and then stopped about midway across the top. So I'm at the point where I can add in the ornament hanger, but I'm also going to do a little bit of stuffing here, but I'm not going to do any in the post for the spool of thread because that'll be puffy enough once we add in the front and back of the spool. So I'll get a little bit more stuffing in here, and you could totally use something like thread scraps if you don't have polyfill fiber. I've been working on the same bag for, I don't know, probably over a decade. I think I want my ornament hanger about here, so I think I can take one more stitch and then I'm just gonna sandwich this in here so that the knot is inside the ornament, and I'm just gonna sew right through it and secure it. You could add a little bit of glue too if you want. And I'm pausing up here now by the tension post because before I close this up, I need to do the spool for the thread next because I'm gonna have the thread, well, embroidery floss as more of a visible stand-in for thread. I'm going to wrap that around the spool and end up inside the tension post. So I will stop the thread at the tension post. And then I'm going to have my needle, which will be threaded with the same embroidery floss. And I'm going to embed the needle inside here. So I kind of need to do all of this more or less at the same time. So I'm going to glue on the front of this teensy little spool first, and then I'll attach the back and then sew them together. And yeah, I mean, I have to admit, pointy angles, little bitty pointy angles are hard in felt, and this spool is so teensy and you lose a little bit of the shape as you sew this. But honestly, wrapping it with the floss will really make it read as a spool of thread. And you know, the fact that it's sitting on top of a sewing machine. And this is an ornament after all. We don't have to get too precise here. This is supposed to be fun. Now I have a little length of a few strands of my embroidery floss here with a small knot in one end. I'll just place the knot at the back of the spool and pull up through the spool and start wrapping it around fairly tightly around the entire spool and the post. And you can now see it's definitely starting to look like a spool of thread. And I will need a little bit of glue here to help me out, so I'm going to use some fray check since it's clear right away, and I just use that to secure the loose floss to the spool. And then I need to secure the other end of the floss between the two layers for the tension post at the top left. This was real fussy how I did this. I glued it down and then I needed to cut the tails so they didn't show. I think if I were to do this again, I might just thread the floss on the needle and knot it at the back of the post. But whatever, secure this however you want, and then close up the tension post with your contrast color thread. If you used my method, be sure some of your stitches poke through the embroidery floss for added security. Now I have my thread at the top done, and I'm going to actually, I could have done this earlier, but take my needle out because I'm going to leave this. This is just because this is where I stopped temporarily, and I'm going to do the needle before I close this up, but I'm going to close up the center bit because I think that's going to make it a lot easier for me to do the needle at the edge once that's done. So I will start closing this up and stuff as I go, and then get to the needle, and I'm almost done. So I'm closing up the center of the sewing machine here and stuffing it as I go. You can really construct this in any order, whatever works best for you, so long as you do the bobbin and the needle last, since they're the hardest to work around. I went all the way around the inside part and then back down towards the base where I'd started originally. But I left the part around the little contrast color square on the upper part of the sewing machine open, since we'll be inserting the needle in next. I don't need to do that to the bottom though, because we'll literally be stabbing the needle down through into the ornament from the outside. I'm almost done, and here is how I'm going to handle trying to thread this needle that I am going to stick into the teeny tiny little throat plate. I have a few strands of embroidery floss threaded on a needle, and I'm going to go in through the side, just between two stitches, where there's enough of a gap that I can pull this knot up into the inside, and I'm going to come out, basically attempt to come out in the center of this. Oh, I'm close. It doesn't have to be perfect, but okay, there we go. And I'm going to pull that through so that I bury the knot, just to get a little tug, perfect, onto the inside. So now I need to unthread my sewing needle, and I need to thread this onto my machine needle, which I'm going to do off camera because I have to get really, really close to it. So I pulled that up through this bit, and I threaded my old sewing machine needle on here, and I'm just going to embed this in. And the thing is, I don't know, this is just me. I thought it'd be fun having thread, but I realized because I needed thread that, you know, you could see, so I'm using embroidery floss, kind of hides the needle when you pull it up. So I'm going to try, and I think what I'm going to do is glue this to the top of the needle, but then also try and orient this so it's slightly sideways so you can see a little bit of the thread, a little bit of the needle, and then embed it inside the top so this will all be hidden, except for that little bit right there. Okay. And see, you know, I kind of like that because I can see the needle, I can see the thread, and I will just now close up that last little bit once I stuff that, and I'll be done. If you feel like the thread is more fussy than you want to deal with, then just wrap some around the spool and knot it off at the back and give it a little glue, and just use a needle instead and don't bother threading anything. But by the way, if you don't have a sewing machine needle or prefer to not actually use a needle, you could totally just use a narrow gauge wire for the needle instead. And here's my finished ornament. It is so cute. Now you could put the ornament hanger in front of or behind the thread, whichever you'd prefer, and you are ready to hang this wherever you'd like, on your Christmas tree or otherwise. I just love this ornament, and I really think you'll love making one too. Don't forget, my template to cut the felt parts out is linked in the video description. If you enjoy tutorials like this, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and give this video a thumbs up. And check out one of these two videos too. Happy sewing!